It was August 17th, 1980, when a young Australian family, Michael and Lindy Chamberlain, along with their 3 children, set up camp beneath the red monolith of Uluru, a place sacred to the local indigenous people and hauntingly beautiful in the desert dusk. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the fire crackled in the open air, Lindy tucked their 9-week-old baby girl, Azaria, into a tent just meters away. And what happened next would trigger one of the most infamous legal battles and public frenzies in Australian history, because minutes later, Lindy screamed the words that would become legend, grief, and satire all at once. "A dingo's got my baby." That one sentence, piercing, primal, panicked, would split public opinion, dominate headlines for years, and eventually land a mother in prison for a crime she didn't commit. But at that moment, in the soft terror of night, what mattered was that Azaria was gone. The tent was bloodied, and no one knew where the child had vanished. Rangers and campers rushed to help, flashlights beaming across the spinifex and red sand, searching for footprints, fur, signs of life or death. And within hours, the police arrived, already skeptical, already focused less on the wild dogs that roamed the area and more on the family's behaviour, because Lindy, they said, was too calm, too composed, too strange in her faith and manner, and the story of a dingo taking a baby, while not unheard of, sounded too wild, too cinematic, too impossible to believe. But to the Chamberlains, it was the truth. To investigators, it was a riddle. And to the media, it was gold. What began as a family tragedy under the desert stars would become a national obsession, a courtroom circus, and a textbook case of how fear, media, and myth can bend justice until it breaks. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the initial investigation, the rumours that fueled suspicion, and how a grieving mother became the prime suspect in her own child's disappearance. In the days following Azaria's disappearance, sympathy for the Chamberlains quickly soured as the media turned its lens not toward the dangers of wild dingoes or the gaps in forensic science, but toward the behaviour of a grieving mother who didn't cry on cue, didn't beg the cameras for forgiveness, and didn't seem broken enough for the headlines that demanded anguish. And soon Lindy Chamberlain wasn't seen as a mother in mourning. She was cast as cold, distant, possibly dangerous, and alongside her Michael became the passive, overly religious father whose calmness was treated like complicity, and the world began to whisper that maybe this wasn't a tragedy, it was a cover-up. The story began to mutate, fed by rumour and fear, that the name Azaria meant sacrifice in the wilderness, which it didn't, that the Chamberlains, as Seventh-day Adventists, were part of some cultic ritual, which they weren't, and that no dingo could carry off a baby without leaving carnage, which simply wasn't true. But perception beat reality, and the narrative turned from bizarre to sinister. The police doubled down, claiming inconsistencies in Lindy's story and pointing to evidence that later turned out to be flawed. A supposed bloody handprint in the car, marks on Azaria's clothing that looked like scissor cuts, and the assertion that dingoes wouldn't have dragged the baby far. Yet no body had been found. Prosecutors argued that Lindy killed Azaria in the family car with a pair of scissors, staged the tent scene, and fabricated the dingo attack. And though no motive was ever convincingly offered, and no physical evidence truly supported the claim, a wave of public opinion swept over the courtroom like a tide of certainty. In 1982, Lindy Chamberlain was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, while Michael was found guilty as an accessory, though his sentence was suspended. The baby jacket Lindy swore Azaria was wearing, long denied by the prosecution as even existing, remained unfound, and Lindy gave birth to her 4th child behind bars, separated from her newborn even as she grieved the one taken years earlier. In a country that prided itself on fairness and justice, a family had been crushed under the weight of public scrutiny and flawed science, and a courtroom had silenced the truth in favour of a story that sold newspapers. But the desert, as it turns out, keeps secrets, but not forever. In the next part, we'll uncover the incredible twist that brought the truth back to light, a chance discovery, a second tragedy, and the jacket that changed everything. For 3 long years, Lindy Chamberlain sat behind bars, branded as a murderer. Her husband left to raise their children under the cloud of suspicion, and their names etched into headlines, not as victims, but as monsters. And the story of Azaria, the baby taken by the outback, had settled into the public's memory as a crime solved, a mother judged, and a truth officially recorded in the court's pages, until, one afternoon in 1986, a different tragedy cracked that version of the truth wide open, when a British tourist named David Brett slipped while climbing Uluru, fell to his death, and when search teams located his remains at the base of the rock, scattered in a remote area near a known dingo den, they found something else among the rocks and brush, a small, weathered baby jacket, partially buried, sun-bleached and torn, matching the exact description Lindy had given years earlier. A jacket the prosecution had insisted never existed, and whose absence had helped send her to prison. And just like that, the story changed. Suddenly, the impossible was not only possible, it was proven. Forensic experts confirmed the jacket was Azaria's. The location aligned with Lindy's original account, and the denial of that jacket's existence, so central to the Crown's case, was exposed as a devastating mistake, or worse, willful ignorance. The discovery prompted immediate calls for a review of the conviction. Scientists re-evaluated the blood evidence, and what had once been considered a key link, supposed blood, in the Chamberlain's car, turned out to be nothing more than sound-deadening compound and spilled milk, and with the case now visibly unravelling, a royal commission was appointed to investigate. In 1988, Lindy was officially released from prison and her conviction overturned. Michael was cleared. The Australian government issued an apology and awarded the couple $1.3 million in compensation, a sum that didn't come close to covering the legal fees, the lost years, or the irrevocable damage to their family. But perhaps worse than the legal betrayal was the social one. Neighbours, strangers, even former supporters who had turned on them in their time of grief, all fed by a media machine that had reduced a mother's pain to a punchline and a dead child's name to a slogan. Still, the truth had surfaced, literally pulled from the dust of the desert. The dingo had taken Azaria. Lindy hadn't lied, and justice, delayed and disfigured, had finally taken its first breath of clarity. In the final part, we'll reflect on how this case changed Australia, how media, prejudice, and fear fueled one of the worst miscarriages of justice in modern history, and what it means when a nation fails a family it should have protected. Long after Lindy walked free and the courts admitted their mistake, the shadows of the Chamberlain case still lingered across Australia, not just because of the wrongful conviction, but because of what the case revealed about a society that had turned a grieving mother into a national villain, where justice wasn't just delayed, it was distorted by fear, culture, and a hunger for a clean, compelling villain. And in that vacuum, facts were replaced by bias, and tragedy became entertainment. The role of the media was undeniable. From the earliest coverage, Lindy Chamberlain's every move was dissected on national TV, her tone interpreted as guilt, her beliefs twisted into suspicion, her wardrobe made symbolic. And while the press never explicitly called her a killer, they didn't have to. The headlines, the framing, the repetition of her supposed coldness did the damage, and millions followed. Then there was the public, so quick to believe the worst, to turn a complex story into a binary, to mock and quote a mother's cry as if it were a joke. And even today, the phrase, "a dingo took my baby," is remembered more for its pop culture echoes than the agony behind it. But at its core, this was never about a strange name or an unusual religion or a mother who didn't cry for the cameras. It was about a failure to listen, to believe, and to weigh evidence without prejudice. It took decades for the truth to be formally acknowledged. In 2012, over 30 years after Azaria's disappearance, a new inquest issued the final word. A coroner officially ruled that a dingo had indeed taken the baby, affirming what Lindy had said from the very beginning. At the press conference that followed, Lindy said only what needed to be said. Azaria was taken by a dingo. No anger, no vindication, just the truth at last. And in the end, what remains is more than just a family shattered. It is a cautionary tale, a study in how quickly empathy can erode when judgment is easier, how deeply public perception can bury the truth, and how important it is to question the stories we're told, especially when they come wrapped in certainty and scandal. The Chamberlains lost their daughter, their freedom, and years they'll never recover, not because of what they did, but because a nation couldn't accept a story that didn't fit its expectations. In the desert, the dingo's tracks may fade, but the marks left on justice and on the family it failed remain forever.